All right, well, first, welcome, and thank you for attending the panel today. Really appreciate it. It's great to see everybody. I can see a lot of networking going on, which is already fantastic, and we'll make sure that that continues throughout the day. But before we move on, I'd like to take a moment to welcome the President of the United States Army Warrant Officer Association, CW5 Mike Dye. The Warrant Officer Association has been a steadfast advocate for our cohort, and we are fortunate to have their continued support. Please join me in welcoming Mike to the stage.
Thanks, Aaron. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, first of all, to AUSA, our partner, for allowing us to participate in this breakfast. We've been having these warrant officer breakfasts and WOPDs now for the last several years, and I think we're seeing a continuing growing audience. First of all, I can ask, where are the company grade warrant officers? If you're a company grade warrant officer, please raise your hand. All right, everybody look around and see that. I like to say this. So these events are awesome for us as senior leaders, right? We go back to our units, we're participating, we're hearing from our general officers, our senior army leaders, right? But the folks that are going to be leading us in the next fight and down the road in the years to come are these young warrant officers, right? So we need to do everything we can to make sure that we bring them, we share the information that's put out here, and prepare them for what they're going to be facing when we all decide to take the uniform off. All right, cool. All right, so again, as part of a pleasure being here as the president of the Warrant Officer Association. If you're familiar with us, we're a member of the larger military coalition, 35 organizations, 5.5 million people, soldiers, veterans from all the military. Our president of the TMC, Jack Dutil, is here. So USAWA is just one of the associations that advocate for the military, and the association advocates on behalf specifically of the warrant officers. And if you haven't seen yet, for the first time ever, we actually have a kiosk out in the partner area up in Hall B, so please stop by there and see us up there as well. So with that, I'd like to introduce our next guest speaker. Chief Warrant Officer 5 Doug England began his military service in 1986 and became a UH-1H helicopter repairer and crew chief. He served with distinction in Desert Storm, transitioned to the Colorado National Guard, and later returned to active duty, graduating from the Warrant Officer Basic Course and Flight School. CW5 England's career highlights include serving with the 160th Special Operations Aviation Regiment Airborne and as the Senior Warrant Officer Advisor to the Secretary of the Army for Talent Management. Over his career, he logged more than 7,000 flight hours and 34 combat tours, executing over 2,500 missions in support of the global war on terrorism. Since retiring, CW5 England has pursued public service and now works for Bell Textron as a regional representative at Fort Campbell. He holds a bachelor's degree in aviation management and is a highly decorated, including 2 Silver Stars and 3 Distinguished Flying Cross medals. CW5 England and his wife Christina have been married for 33 years and are proud parents and grandparents. At this time, I'd like to introduce Doug England.
Well, good morning, and let's get motivated. We're going to talk about warrant officer stuff. The biggest thing is, even though I've been retired 4 years, I still bleed brown, right? Is that the right color for warrant? Anyways, it's still there. But it's good to have pride. It's good to have and know the legacy. It's good to know where we came from and where we're at today. And that's what we're going to talk about. And so that's where I'm excited to be. Thanks to Phyllis Wilson and Paving the Path, being on the board of directors for AUSA, there's a warrant officer that sits on the executive board of AUSA to help kind of shape where things go for AUSA, and our first in-person meeting is this December. I do have the honor of being on the Chief Staff of the Army's Retiree Council to bring up what warrant officer issues and challenges for retention, retirement, those things. So I'll be working in unison with the 3 leaders up here to help express that to our senior leadership. But I do want to, before we get into the panel, I want to emphasize the external, the outside view looking into the warrant officer cohort. It's amazing the technical expertise that is viewed from industry, that's viewed from the public, and how valuable the warrant officer profession is, and how well sought after the warrant officers are for industry. You have no idea how marketable you are because you are experts within experts, and you are a profession within a profession of soldiers. So you should pat yourself on the back. But they, with the initiatives of Chief of Staff of the Army, starting with transformation. Transformation means, in this case, for the discussion now, is policy. I cannot express and what we've witnessed, the sensitivity of Compo 1 changes, Compo 2 changes, how they cross-pollinate when it comes to federal recognition, all that. So keep that in mind, that it is a very difficult task to solve. You have policy and you have law, and these three well-esteemed leaders up here are going to answer a lot of those questions. But before we get into it, I do want to introduce, we do have the first Chief Warrant Officer of the Army, which is a feat in itself, to get a position on with the Chief of Staff of the Army, the Sergeant Major of the Army, to start growing in that position. So Aaron Anderson, congratulations, being the first Chief Warrant Officer of the Army. And it is not without the hard work of Yolanda Dixon Carter. If she was here today, I'd give her a big hug for what she paved, and she had the vision, and to have you as first selected. And it was a very, very hard selection, almost down to an assessment of who was selected for that position. So congratulations. So moving on down, the difficult task right now that Brian Searcy, you and I have worked in the Pentagon before, being the Command Chief Warrant Officer of the National Guard. I will mention that Brian, he's the Command Chief Warrant Officer of the National Guard, but he has 54 territories and states that have 54 good ideas and competing requirements. So congratulations to being the Command Chief Warrant Officer for the National Guard. And then we also have LaShawn White. CW5 White is the Command Chief Warrant Officer for the Reserves. Also has challenge of citizen soldiers, and you're getting into that really only 10% are really activated. What do you do for those warrant officers that have a profession of a different field, then they come in the reserves, and now they're maybe a signal warrant or they're an aviator or something that's completely different from what the challenges they have from Compo 2 and Compo 3 is something that is very hard to understand if you're a Compo 1. So without further ado, I'd like to open it up for panels, and we're going to go straight into to questions, or we're going to go down to opening statements?
Yeah, we'll go to opening statements. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay, all right, that's great. Well, first and foremost, thank everybody for being here today. It's so great to see this room full, and we can talk about warrant officer issues, so this is going to be fantastic. In the course of coming into the job, I've gone out and done a lot of leader engagements, and I always find it's better when there's dialogue and discussion. So the three of us up here are going to put forth a few ideas as we get into this, and then we're going to pretty quickly open it up for dialogue and discussion. Because as much as maybe you want to hear what we want to talk about, I'm also interested to hear what you want to talk about and what's on your mind. So the first thing I would tell you is that as warrant officers, we are definitely, the future is looking bright for the cohort. General Braga mentioned a few initiatives that we had going on, so talking about things that we're doing in UAS and counter UAS, things that USASOC's doing in the robotics field. There's a lot of emerging growth for us, and there's a lot of appetite. If you look at the FDUs that have come across, as we've developed the multi-domain task forces, the theater fires elements, the composite watercraft organizations, a lot of those are increases in warrant officer authorization. So you can see that the demand's out there, and I think that's pretty important. Other things that we have going on, well, as Mr. Englund mentioned, we created the Warrant Officer of the Army position, and that's, and I would definitely give my thanks and gratitude to Ms. Dixon Carter, and it's too bad she couldn't be here today, but she put a lot of work into that, and just appreciate her efforts. We'll continue to mature the position as we move forward. It'll be an iterative process. There's been 17 Sergeants Major of the Army, and everyone builds on the previous, and so we'll continue to work down that path as well, and it'll be good. So really appreciative for that. I think as the Chief sees the position, obviously we're going to use the position to take care of the cohort, but also looking at Army problems and then solving Army problems through a warrant officer lens. So we have a little bit different lens than maybe they've seen before up in the front office, and we'll continue to pursue that pathway and try to generate good options for the Army senior leaders. So I think that'll be good. Other areas that we continue to move on are CW5 management. So on the Compo 1 side of the house, I think we are in a pretty good spot with taking our CW5s out of the AIM-2 process and having them managed by BOD. I would say 70% of the cohort is already doing that or is moving in that direction, so I think that's a good thing. I would say we still have a little bit of a challenge managing our O11 alpha authorizations on the Compo 1 side, and so more work will be done there. I think we'll talk about that as we go into the next panel, so I'm not going to dwell on that, but more work to be done there. So, you know, looking at things that we're doing across the Army in terms of the Chief's priorities, so if you're not tracking the priorities, so warfighting, delivering combat-ready formations, continuous transformation, and then steward-in profession. So those are kind of the bins and the focus areas for the Army. And underneath each of those bins, there's a warrant officer role in all of that as integrators. So if you look at the transformation and contact brigades or the TIC brigades that have been established, so 3rd 10th Mountain, 2nd of the 25th, and then 2nd Brigade of the 101st, those are TIC brigades. There's a lot going on there. So things in the UAS, counter-UAS world where we're looking at transformation, doing things differently, looking at integrating EW into that piece. And if you're not tracking, 2nd and the 101st has developed a multifunction reconnaissance company to kind of bind all those things and bring them together. And it's really powerful. We learned a lot of lessons when they did their latest JRTC rotation. A lot going on there, and warrant officers are all part of that. So pretty powerful. Other areas that I've seen recently, looking at things that we're doing in the area of advanced manufacturing. If you're not tracking, that's really 3D printing. But there's additive and subtractive manufacturing. Warrant officers playing a key role there, both at the tactical edge and then looking at what we can do in a garrison environment. So that's really good. Some of the areas that we've worked on in the past that still need a little bit of attention, I would tell you from about 2016 to 2019, we were assessing on the Compo 1 side for a different force structure. We were very much tailored to COIN. We probably shorted ourselves a little bit. We've done a lot moving forward to get after that problem. And I'd like to recognize CW4 Camp Fry over there with the Warrant Officer Recruiting Company. Over the last 3 years, we've made our mission minus a handful every year. And this year we made 100% of mission minus 180 Alpha and 351 Yankee. And that's a very unique MOS. And the 180 Alphas are kind of internally recruited. So hats off. And if we could give a round of applause to Chief Fry and the team. So job really well done. I know that you'll have an opportunity to speak in a little while here and look forward to hearing what you have to say. I think it's going to be great, but it's important that we maintain those accessions numbers to keep the cohort healthy. So really good there. The other thing, if you listen to the Secretary's speech carefully yesterday, she talked about stability. And one of the things that I hear every time that I go out is stability and quality of life are more important than monetary compensation when it comes to retaining warrant officers. So specifically talking to our W3s and W4s. And so we are working with G1D and PM to really get after some tangible things that we can do to provide that stability. You know, yesterday it was mentioned maybe going from a 3-year movement cycle to a 5-year movement cycle. Maybe there's some of that. Working with Chief Lawrence and the Talent Innovation Division, I think there's some other options on the table there. And so we'll continue to pursue those options. But as for the cohort, what I just ask from you is continue to be innovative, continue to be visionary, continue to focus on your area. I would say your point of view and your voice matters. For warrant officers, if we want to sit at the table, we always have to be present. And so do that. Be present. Provide those options. Provide that menu of options to the leadership and continue to drive us down the road of transformation. So really important. Now, before we go to these two gentlemen to my right and left, as General Braga mentioned as well, you know, we're up here as all 3 compos, as a joint Army, and that's how we're going to fight. We're never going to fight again as just Compo 1 or Compo 2 or Compo 3. So it was really important for me to have these gentlemen up here with me so we can cover all the bases on all three compos. And I look forward to the dialogue and discussion. I think in the interest of time, I'll kind of cap it there. And what I'd like to do is turn it over to CW5 Brian Searcy from Army National Guard. Brian.
Hey, thank you, Aaron. Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm grateful to be here. Hey, Doug, the advantage of having 54 different armies is I get 54 different ideas, and some of those ideas are really, really good. One of those ideas I'll focus on just real quick is the Warrant Officer Candidate Accession Program. So when we initiated that a few years ago, when some of the states down in Region 3, like Chief Jolly, let's see, going way back, Mississippi, prior to you, Doug, or Chief Dukes. Tommy Smith. So, you know, when I first saw that thing, I didn't know what to think about it for sure. But hey, let me tell you what our numbers are this year. So the National Guard's mission this year was 840 to assess 840 warrant officers. The Army National Guard this year assessed 960 warrant officers, and that doesn't count the 20 additional warrant officers that the 54 slow rolled and rolled into this year. But anyway, but still good job. 960, we've never got that in the Army National Guard, so I'm super happy about that. And I attribute that to that Warrant Officer Candidate Accession Program. It seems like the organizations that are implementing that program tend to assess a third more warrant officers a year than those that don't. And what that does is it gets people ready to improve their GT scores. It helps them put their packets together. So what we found in the past is we'd have soldiers going to their drill weekend, and they would tell their training NCO or their readiness NCO, hey, I want to become a warrant officer. And these are M-Day soldiers, right? And this training NCO and readiness NCO says, hey, get to me during the week, right? And then we'll help you put your packet. Soldier goes home, and nothing happens that month. And then the next month they come back. And so what we decided to do is come up with a program where when we identified somebody that wanted to be a warrant officer, we could split them out, send them to that organization, and have them start getting ready. And what we do is we take our W1s that have just got done with Warrant Officer Candidate School, who haven't went to WOBC, and we have those individuals mentor those new warrant officers. So it doesn't cost us really anything, but it helps us cross the finish line to get those warrant officers assessed. Anyway, thank you, 54. Good job, great session. Again, warrant officer end strength continues to grow across all three compos. Although we made that headwind in Compo 2, again, we grew another, as soon as September 1st rolled around, we increased in end strength another 107 warrant officers, and then next FY we'll assess another 56. So we're starting to flat out a little bit, but we got to be somewhere around 1,000 accessions a year to close that gap and get to 100%. And it's just not, it's all three compos, you know, 200 plus warrant officers that we've been growing a year since 2000. So warrant officer, especially technical end strength, continues to grow, and in the foreseeable future it will, so we need to keep our foot on the gas pedal. The Army National Guard has a new director, Lieutenant General John Stubbs. He's full of energy. All of his lines of effort are nested with that of the Chief of Staff of the Army, those of warfighting, delivering combat-ready formations, transformation in combat, and profession of the arms. And what General Stubbs says, he adds to all those, ready for combat, ready for combat, ready for combat, and ready for combat. So, you know, as we progress, I'm excited to have a new director. He's full of energy. I'm grateful to have Aaron with us, and also LaShawn. You know, we talk regularly. We're advocating for you. We're not disconnected at all. So I want to know that we're here for all of your issues, just not one compo. Thanks. That's all I have.
All right. Good morning. Can you hear me? So first thing I want to start off by saying is like Brian said, we're connected. We're always engaged. We're always talking to each other, and we're always trying to find out those ideas because we can't do it alone. And we've learned that over the years. In Compo 3, we have our own challenges, but we also have some surprises and some great things that have come about. So we have a new leadership, new CSM. We have a new commander, and our commander is just as fiery as the National Guard's new commander. So there are things that they have in common. He has his 4 lines of effort, which are building combat-ready formations, mobilize and deploy. You don't really hear that a lot from the Compo 3 side of the house, that is a primary objective, to mobilize and deploy. but also to adapt and transform, and to take care of our families. That is one of his key initiatives, to take care of our families. So when I align my 4 objectives, I put them out there as my 4 Bs. One is to be visible. Because as warrant officers, we have to learn, if we want to grow new warrant officers, we have to be visible. And we find that as a challenge sometimes. Sometimes we're so integrated in our work that we don't take the time to step out and to train those new people that could come behind us. And when we're talking about our reserve formations, you know, it's hard to get in front of everybody at one time. We're talking drill weekends when you have just a little bit of time. You have 2 days to make things happen. You know, unfortunately for a lot of us as senior positions, you don't have enough time to get out there and talk to every warrant or every soldier and pull them in and say, hey, I need you to do this. Because the boss wants something too. Time is valuable. But you have to find that way to be visible. Not only just be visible, you got to be engaged. Because if you're not being engaged and you're not taking that seat at the table, someone's going to take it from you. It's happening every day. We see it all the time. And it's not just during drill weekend for Compo 3 or Compo 2. It's getting on those meetings that you don't want to get on. Those Wednesday night meetings, those Thursday night meetings. Sometimes you have to get engaged in a way that's going to take time off your plate. You may have to put in a 1380 for points. You may get paid. You may get reimbursed. And sometimes you won't. But when you put on this rank and you put on that position of authority, whether it's the senior supply warrant or the senior maintenance warrant, you're putting in a position of authority where people are looking up to you. People are really looking up to you, and they're counting on everything that you do. Next is to be family oriented. We can't do this without our families. Doesn't matter what compo you are. If your family doesn't support you, you can't do this efficiently or effectively. You will not have the desire to do it. And sometimes you just want to just tap out. Make sure that your family is behind every idea and they are within every idea. Don't make this be about you and your supervisor's decision. Family first. It's one of General Harder's priorities. It's one of my priorities. Family first. And the last thing I ask is them to be ready. Because if you're not ready, we fail. If you as an individual have not taken the time to be ready, whether it's fitness, whether it's mental health, whether it's just being able to take some time to yourself, watch the football game, or just being with friends, something that just picks your day up and brings life back to you. If you're not ready, the formation isn't ready. So across the Army Reserve, we've seen some growth. We're right now at 79% with our warrant officer population. It's not where we want to be, but, you know, we're at 35, 75 as of yesterday. And that fluctuates 5 to 10 each day. We want to make sure that the numbers keep going in. Whatever we can keep in, we know we're going to have people retire. We know we're going to have people say, hey, it's time to do something else in life, and there's nothing wrong with that. But what we really want to do is make sure that our middle management, that we're still growing our middle management. And that's what one of the problems we're not seeing. You know, how do we keep our 2s and our W3s engaged enough to make W4 and W5? So we've looked at new initiatives across the Army Reserve and across the other compos as well that we hope that will engage people and help them out and want to inspire them to continue service. Our E5 and 5 initiative, it has done well in building our NCO population from our E5s and E6s. We set around 90% in those categories. Unfortunately, we also sit at 61% in our E7s. We sit at 70% in our E9s. Now we're at 91% in our E8s, so hopefully we'll spread it out and we can bring some of those E5s and E6s along the way. So the same pool that we're recruiting from as warrant officers, our senior NCOs are recruiting from as well. So I don't see that as a challenge as long as we continue to grow and our recruiting efforts continue. But other than that, it's a great Army. It's a great Army day. And I'm proud to serve with you. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so we're going to open it up to some questions. and kind of keep it at policy level. But if it's a branch issue, try to keep it at a branch issue. We're looking at a holistic, Army big picture look. So if there's like some technical things that like you want to bring up, maybe we kind of keep those sidebar. But what are your questions right now? And calling on, so in no order, do we have questions out there you want to get some answers to? Force structure on the horizon. What does transformation and contact mean? What does that mean for the warrant officer cohort? What does it mean for the ranks? Any questions?
Hi, CW5, Deanna Hughes, CCWO for Army Medical Command. So, as you know, I've started 2 CCWO positions. We have several other individuals in the audience who have also started CCWO positions and are sitting in that position. When I was writing the white paper for this last position, it was interesting to me to see how really Compo 2 led the way with that, with all of their state CCWOs, and then Compo 3 really embraced the CCWOs, and then Compo 1, with the exception of aviation and special forces, was a little bit slow, and medical especially slow, as we just got ours in the last couple of years. But what I found is as we fill more of these positions and we take more of these leadership roles and we sit at the table, we lean in, where is the policy behind behind what we're doing to indicate where our authority lies, our responsibilities lie, and just even down to the protocol? Is that something the 3 of you are working together to build that policy now, to show what does that mean with that MILPER message that we're part of the command team, and how will that be codified?
Well, Ms. Hughes, I'll go ahead and take the first swing at this and then open it up. But I think it continues to be an iterative process. So we had the MILPER message, which laid out the definitions and responsibilities for CCWO and then SWOA. We're working right now for the appropriate regulations to make sure those are updated. In terms of the protocol piece of this, I think that will continue to develop. I would say, as I look at things, I don't think that there's going to be, in the near term, a mandate to have CCWOs in the formations. Though I can tell you, like at First Corps and 7ID, just within the last 6 months, they've established CCWO positions. So I think that momentum is going to continue, and part of it is those individuals getting in place and then showing good value and good return on investment for being in those positions, just frankly being present and showing as warrant officers we do have that different lens, and we come to you with a menu of different options. So I think part of that is on us as a cohort as well to show value in the positions that we do have, and we'll continue to mature that as we move down the road. And with that, I'd open it up to Brian or LaShawn.
Go ahead, Brian.
So here's kind of what I'd say, because I have 54 different armies to look at, right? And here's what's going to be really important for you and all those new CCWOs. If you go in and you do a really, really good job, then your commanding general is going to elevate you to the level that you need to be at. If you don't do such a good job, then the person that has to replace you has a lot of making up to do. So it is key when you go in and you're running fast and hitting hard. I don't worry about the protocol piece, because the Army has a protocol regulation that they never follow, right? So that I don't worry about it. Like, Aaron and I were sitting 4 rows back today, right? Or yesterday, or 5, or even maybe 6. But I don't worry about that proportion, because again, what I have seen is if you as the CCWO are doing the job you're supposed to be doing and acting as that advisor to your commander, you'll get elevated quickly. So I think it all has to do with doing what you're supposed to do and showing your value. And once you show your value, then that will further the CCWO brand.
I definitely agree with that. It's one of the challenges that we find when we're dealing with commanders, and we've all seen it as warrant officers. You've been in a position where someone sometime in history has upset some young officer, and that young officer has not forgot about that. And throughout those ranks of becoming a senior leader in the Army and a warrant officer, I've dealt with that recently. I've had senior leaders say, hey, not really sure what to do with you, not sure what a CCWO's role is. And so you just really have to take it positive, stay engaged, and there's certain things that, yes, in the back of your mind, you say, I deserve that right. But you also have to say, you know, is it worth the fight? And what does that fight take away from the ability to do things in the future? And I'll bring up one that I've brought up many times before. At the 377 TSC when I was the CCWO. That's the largest two-star command in the total DOD, 35,000 soldiers, 10,000 civilians. No parking spot for the CCWO. G1 got a parking spot, G2 got a parking spot, G3 got a parking spot, JAG got a parking spot, Chaplain got a parking spot. The CCWO, the DCG, Sergeant Major, Chief of Staff, there's parking spots. CCWO does not. But what I did do was went in there and stayed engaged. And in the back of my mind, and my senior warrants within the command, they let me know, why you don't have a parking spot? And they did, and they were justified in saying so. But I said that the time for that fight isn't right now. That time is coming. But it was hard, I'm gonna tell you. I found my own little spot, but it was hard. Yeah. Every once in a while, just out of spite, I would take somebody's. But there's certain protocol things that we need, and it's not because we need it as an individual. We need it because the rest of the staff needs to see it. And when that commanding general and sergeant major starts treating you as part of the command team, and you're traveling together and seeing things together and engaged in the meetings together. But if you're going just to be the doorstop or to carry a bag, you're going for the wrong reason. You have to be physically engaged in the meeting. You have to be value added, and you have to let whoever your boss is, or the people with your boss, because they have a voice too, because they're whispering too. Why did we bring this person? That's a seat we could have had on the plane for someone else. You have to be value added. And if you're not, then pick your fights and choose your fights carefully.
And to maybe even help out, and where AUSA and other councils, we look at what authority versus authorization is. So, every warrant officer is appointed by the Secretary of the Army by warrant. And so warrant officer ones do not have they're not authorized to take the authority of 600-20. All those authorities that are bequeathed to a commander because they're a commissioned officer doesn't come until you become CW2. So you're authorized as a CW2 because you're now commissioned and you met those levels of background and vetted process to be of good character to have those authorities. But what does that mean now as a command chief warrant officer? So that's the work to be done. So you're authorized to kind of fill those positions, but what does that truly mean? It's almost like the command sergeant major of a battalion and a brigade and things. They don't have authority over soldiers. The commander still does. So where does that fit in with the command chief warrant officer? So that's the answers to be dissected and researched to help them come up with the solutions. Any more questions?
Okay. Those that don't know me, CW5 Finney, the Command Chief Warrant Officer at USASOC. When I was the commandant at our Warrant Officer Institute, a guy named Pat Nelligan came knocking on my door. And CW5 Nelligan, he asked me, he said, hey, so I'm looking at developing my senior warrant officers in the reserve to be CCWOs. Like, where did you learn to be a CCWO? And I had to stop and think about it. I'm like, well, I was just developed over time by the guys that were ahead of me. So I think we're getting there. Some of you might have some comments or ideas for the group on how to do that, but I was recently out at Fort Huachuca with Mr. Davis, spoke to a bunch of MI warrant officers, and the question came up when I talked about leadership. It's like, okay, well, how are we leaders but still technical experts in our career field? And I think it's just that mindset of, hey, when you're W1, W2, you're a technical expert in your career field. You're focused on being a doer. But then we need to get our warrant officers in the mindset of like, okay, now as I become a W3, junior W4, I'm kind of understanding how my technical expertise then integrates into the larger processes. And then as I become a W4, W5, now I'm more of an innovator, but I'm still a leader. I'm still a leader, but I'm still focused on my technical expertise, but that changes over time of what that focus is of your technical expertise. And that's the way we're going to develop these warrant officers to be future CCWOs in the future. So maybe I'll have some comments or ideas on that.
Those are great comments and thoughts, and appreciate you standing up and mentioning that. I would say as we look at our warrant officer PME continuum, we've recently modernized that, and at this point I think we have irreversible momentum on the PME continuum, which is good, and part of that continuum is a warrant officer master course for our nominative W5. So I think we still have a little bit of work to do in figuring out what exactly nominative means, because I think it means some different things to different people at this point, but we'll work on that and we'll get that figured out. And once we hash out the nominative piece of that, we'll get them to the warrant officer master course, which right now is tied in with the pre-command course or the commander's core course that they do out at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas. So we're heading in that direction. I think if we had additional money and additional resources, maybe we could do more. I think on the NCO side of the house, they have a senior leader course. They have SLC and MLC, I think. There's a course out at Leavenworth that's really good, where they're bringing in folks from industry, folks who are internal to DOD and other places, and kind of getting them spun up. I wouldn't say it's like how the Army runs, but it's a really good polishing course. So I think we need to continue to look at options like that.
Hey, how you doing? CW5 Paul Sankey, NetCom Command Chief Warrant Officer. Just to build on CW5 Hughes' question, as we're looking at CCWO positions, is there going to be any defined criteria for designating a position, CCWO, types of organizations? Who has the authority to do that? There's just, we have theater signal commands underneath NetCom, one-star commands. They are not CCWOs. We're not sure if they should be or not, because there's really no defined criteria.
Well, I would just tell you that what we should do is look at that by branch, and as you take it foundation level, what aviation and SF have done, I think that's kind of the foundation. They didn't ask anybody to define what the CCWO was. They defined it for themselves, and I think that's the path that the rest of the branches need to take for those positions like that. I don't think you need Department of the Army coming down saying, what it is or what it isn't. I think you should probably tackle that at the proponent or the branch level would be my comment.
Good morning, CW3 Kim Ferrante from the 126th Army Band, Michigan Army National Guard. I just had a quick question about the 420 Tango position, talent acquisition technician. Right now, that's not applicable in the National Guard. Just wondered if there was a reasoning behind that, what the thought process was, and what the plan is for that moving forward, if there isn't potentially going to be an opportunity within the Guard.
So not that we couldn't take a swing at that, but we just happen to have the subject matter expert on 420 Tangos here. And so, Chad, we're going to pitch that over to you if you want to comment on that piece.
Thank you, sir. How you doing? I'm CW5 Bowen down at the Adjutant General School. Can I get the question again? I want to make sure I understood it. Was it just basically question when it is going to be open to the Guard, or why it wasn't?
Both, sir, yes. Both.
Both. Okay. So we had to start from somewhere. Be honest. And basically the decision initially was to open it to all three components. But because we were doing it so quickly, leadership from all the components were a little hesitant because we weren't sure how one was going to be developed, the authorizations, the training, the money behind it, right, and the bill payers. So we took it slow. We wasn't sure about Compo 2 and Compo 3 yet, so we started with Compo 1. And if you've recently looked, we have now opened it up now to Compo 3. So Compo 2 obviously was the thought process behind why we're waiting is because the model you have already is already what we're trying to get to. because that individual already is a retention, recruiting, and attrition, right? So that model already, you already kind of have, and there's some little differences in the guard than we have the other components. So once we figure Compo 2 out, Compo 1 and Compo 3 out, then we'll have to start putting together some teams to figure out how do we bring in Compo 2 into this process, because it's a little different in each one. Did I?
Yeah, I think that's good, Chad, and then we'll go over to Mr. Searcy because he had a comment.
Hey, look, here's the deal. The recruiting and retention battalions within the 54 are pretty robust organizations, right? And they have that whole marketing cell, and they have some senior NCOs that are doing, senior NCOs and whole teams that are doing things and the market analysis that the 420 talent acquisition technician would be doing. Look, I am not willing right now to take 011 alpha positions and convert those to 420 tangos. And the reason why is I don't want to take and make a new warrant officer and say, hey, you are going to live in Draper, Utah, or you're going to work in Draper, Utah for the next 20 years in the recruiting and retention battalion with no opportunity to move everywhere. Because remember, the 54, we have borders all the way around our states. And so if I make a 420 tango in the organization, I've got to figure out how to manage that 420 tango for 20 years. So we're being very, very cautious about the way we do this. Now, that being said, am I willing to send maybe some of my, we all know we have like 2 or 3 warrants in our recruiting and retention battalions because they're doing the warrant officer recruiting, they're doing the specialty branch, some of them are even budget officers. I mean, so we've got a lot of warrants in our recruiting and retention battalions. But I'm going to be very slow to do that and watch and let the Army learn just like they watched us during IPSA, right? So I'm gonna let them own this one this time, right? We don't have to take one for the team all the time.
You did go there.
Yeah,
right?
I did, right? So we're gonna watch. Now what I'm not opposed to, if we can get the funding in school seats, I am not opposed to sending some of our warrants officers that work in our recruiting and retention battalions to the 420 Tango course to see what we gain from it. That would kind of be the next step that I would want to do within Compo 2 is send some people to that course, because here's my concern. If we don't make sure in Compo 2 that we have a touch point with the 420 Tango MOS, we're going to quickly lose ground because we're not going to know what they're doing in the market. Right, so that's kind of where I'm a wait and see, but let's probably send somebody but not change their MOS. Does that make sense?
It may be well known. It's well known for these 3 individuals and others that work in Pentagon, but there's a difference between Title 10 and Title 32 authority. So the reason why Compo 1 and Compo 3 seem to be in unison first for something new like this, it's one law, one policy that affects both. Then it has to go to a PPOM, then it has to affect Title 32. And there is only one regulation out there that's specific for warrant officers, and it only resides in Compo 2. So that's also, those are those layers to maybe kind of help some of the reasons why there's a delay for Compo 2.
So I will add that, even though we have started the slow train on Compo 3, we have our challenges as well with moving the 420 Tango. So I had to take a sneak peek with Mr. Bourne this morning, and he said, we have about 200 applicants out there, but commanders are concerned as well, because they're like, what warrant am I going to lose, or what MOS am I going to lose, and what bill payer? I mean, we have some critical shortages in Compo 3 when it comes to warrant officers that might be, the gateway, the avenue for some of them to get out of those critical MOS. Our 890s, they're deploying every 2 years. You just can't find ammo techs. They're just not hanging out on the block. And so we don't want them hanging out on the block either. So you got an ammo tech that decides, maybe 420 is a little easier life than deploying every 2 years. Our 923s, our fuel warrants, we are short in some MOSs, and very critical MOSs where we deploy a lot. And a lot of people don't realize how much those MOSs deploy. And this may be an opportunity for them to take a break. And so commanders are actually calling, hey, am I going to lose this person? Could they switch over? We don't know that. It just depends on what that individual feels about their MOS that they're currently in, and if they want to take the jump at jumping over to something new. So it could be some challenges, and we will see. We'll work through it together. So
We're about 10 minutes out. So are there any branch chiefs in here from Centers of Excellence? Do we have any that are in here? So we have quite a few. So if you have branch issues, please get with them afterwards. We have about 10 minutes of questions.
Okay, so CW5, Nelson, Medical Center of Excellence, CCWO. And this one is, as I look at our low-density warrant officer MOSs, because of the way the Army Reserve and Guard are structured, what I'm seeing is there's not necessarily a career path. I'll use 670 Alpha as a great example. I have 8 W3 authorizations that are in Compo 2. However, there's no development side to really get somebody there. And it's the same concept in other MOSs where if you're more combat support or more combat service support centric. Has there been any work with Congress or anybody understanding the Title 10, Title 32 to create cross paths where somebody can start in the reserves or in the Guard where there's a lot of authorizations, move over and fill the other side and then move back, because otherwise you have career fields that essentially are not, there's no start, no end for them. And so that's part of where I think we run into retention and recruiting issues if you have to start at one level, and that's basically going back to kind of the 420 conversation. So how do you create a 20-year path in an MOS that's probably 1 to 2 deep within a state or within the Guard structure?
That is a great question, and kind of one of the areas that I'm going to have to look to solve that because of the way medical is within the National Guard is I'm going to have to look more at, I would say, our MedCom or our MedDet TDAs. I just became aware of this when I was down visiting you, 30 days ago, so I haven't had a lot of time to look at it. But I think probably where we do this is we're going to have to put some of those feeder MOSs in our MedDet TDA. Now, that will help alleviate another problem we're having in our MedDet TDAs as not having equipment to standard or not even having the right equipment. So as I look through command plan and as I work with our force management branch, and I expect you to give me some more data on this in an email, I would expect that within those MedDets, we're going to have to build some of those feeder MOSs within our TDAs, within our MedDet detachments, and that's probably the only avenue that we're going to have to build those people, because really a lot of the medical requirements reside in Compo 3, not necessarily Compo 2, right? So that's probably the only avenue is to work through the TDAs that I have to build some of those feeder MOSs.
And the one thing I would point out is I use medical as an example. However, there's a lot of other MOSs that have a similar problem from kind of playing it out of medical.
Correct. We see the same thing with our 270s, all those low density MOSs. There's not. But again, most of the upward ability of those are going to reside within the TDA within the state. Yep.
We're going to have another professional development tomorrow, and it's going to dig really deep into some of the talent management and some of the other, below the top level decision making and policy. So any more questions on higher level policies that's at the Chief of Staff, the Guard Bureau, and OCAR, and at that level, what are some questions? And then
Good morning, gentlemen. Yes, I'll hand it to you, so I got you. Good morning, gentlemen. Please share your experiences on leveraging commissioned officers as well as other decision makers and policy writers in modernizing the warrant officer force. We have been attending these meetings and hearing all these great ideas for years now, and it seems that they're not getting anywhere. So and we're then held responsible for fixing our own problems. So how are we leveraging, what are your experiences in leveraging your influence as CCWOs in moving us forward into the future? Thank you.
Who's going to be first to take that one? That's a good question. That's a really good question.
I'll take that. You know, and you know, you don't know whether to say Dr. Sanchez or Chief Sanchez, Dr. Chief Sanchez, Dr. CW5 Sanchez. I will say that in one of the things that we've done is make sure that the leadership knows that that we are, one, trying to better the program and make sure that we get something out there ahead of them that they can understand. So, you know, I want to give props to Miss Wilson. Miss Phyllis Wilson, as you know, is a former CCWO of the Army Reserve, and what she did while she was the CCWO is she created a CCWO handbook. Few years later, Mr. Nelligan, who was also CCW of the Army Reserve, he adjusted the CCWO handbook, bringing it up to staff level and letting them go into it. So I have a handbook that now I have to put some additions to it and talk to the command about and make sure that what they want, and some things that they don't want to hear, but what we believe as warrant officers, as CCWOs, or something that we can use as a tool. It's not a one-size-fits-all, but it is a tool that the CCWOs before me have put together and said, hey, look, if I have to leave something behind, this is something that I can leave out there that will assist us in our OCAR / Army Reserve population of what we need to do and how we need to get things right. Now, we've begun a CCWO orientation course within the Army Reserve, and it is open to Compo 1 and 2. Some people in this room have actually attended it. It's nothing out, it's not formal, but it is something that we have people from HRC come in, we have people from our G1 come in. It's just something, tools that you can use if you're in a leadership position or a CCWO position or wanting to be a CCWO, that you can come in and say, you know what, hey, look, if I had to do this again, if I had to start it again, what would I do better? The teacher's policy, protocol comes in and talks. Our 357 comes in and talks, and it tells about these are the policies that you need in place in order to make change as a warrant officer within, you know, your organization, whether it's the 1-star level, 2-star level, but these are some of the things that you need to know in order to affect change when talking to your GO. So those are some of the things that we've done around that point. Now, it's not an easy task, but that's why we're warrant officers. You have to have that confidence to walk in the room and say, hey, this is what I am looking at, and this is where I think you, sir, or you, ma'am, should look at, because these are the challenges that we face across the board, and you need to know that they're happening. It's not all about roses and kettlebells, and we have a voice as well. And that's what they don't understand. You know, we are a small population when it comes to most organizations. Some of us are in an organization of one, but you're the subject matter expert. And you have to convince that leadership, whether it's standing at their doorstep or whether it's just showing them by action that you know what you're doing. It's being in their face, and it's letting them know that the answers that you're providing them is a trusted answer.
Hey, so I'll take one. I think the senior leaders, at least my senior leaders, or the senior leaders I work for, will pretty much let us do anything we want. I remember I was in a meeting one day where we didn't have enough instructors at a couple of the schoolhouses, and one of the civilians, because again, we have the same problems our senior leaders have, is we got civilians rolling against us all the time, right? And this civilian said, well, we can't give them warrant officers for the schoolhouse because that's going to hurt readiness. And I'm like, well, and the deputy director was like, well, if we don't give them people, we're going to continue to lose, and readiness is going to go down eventually. So we have people that are constantly rolling against us. But I think our biggest problem is us. We're not on the same message. And until we get on the same message as a cohort, we're going to struggle to get senior leaders to believe us. We have to be on the same message, saying the same things, saying the same problems, identifying the same issues. Because, you know, if we've got, like, if you add in all the 54 and all the centers of excellence, and we're all saying different things to our 2-stars, because most of us all report to 2-stars, some of us 3-stars. Actually, a lot of us report to 3-stars too, probably half and half, right? and maybe 1 to a 4-star, right? So, or 2, anyway. So we have got to make sure we're on message. So look, when Aaron puts stuff out saying, hey, this is the direction that we're going, and we all vote say this is the direction we're going, we need to be very, very careful to undermine our own team. So I would just kind of put that out there. We can do whatever we want as long as we are working together. But if we're not working together, we're going to continue the way we have been in the past.
That's good. I don't have anything additional to add to that, but just in the interest of time, if we could go over to Mr. Taylor, and then we'll wrap it up with closing comments.
Thanks for the opportunity. So CW5, Danny Taylor, CASCOM, and Sustainment Center of Excellence at Fort Gregg Adams. So about 3 years ago, there was an Army directive that came out that was pushed by the Army Talent Management Task Force, now Talent Innovation Directorate, that allowed a regular Army warrant officer to retire and transition into the Guard and the Reserve. And there was a subsequent PPOM that was published by National Guard Bureau. Interested in, are we seeing or have we seen gains from that program from into the Guard and the Reserve to help boost our numbers for certain MOSs, whether in this 54 states and territories or on the Compo 3 side? So just curious to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
I have one potential applicant.
So
yes. I will tell you that it has been a challenge, and where that has been a challenge is a lot of people who retire from active duty. One, they don't want to give up pay for drill pay, and that has been the biggest thing, to actually stop pay, drill pay, and then come back. The one that is a potential candidate right now wants to continue flying. So they're getting ready to retire from active duty as a pilot, and there's a potential to continue flying in the Army Reserve. So they love flying, so they don't mind giving up that active duty pay. And I think that's one of the things that have to go back and look at budget Congress and say, do we really have to take away pay or stop pay? Because I think that's our biggest roadblock right there. Everything looked smooth across the table until it was, you have to stop your retirement pay in order to get that drill pay. And that has been the biggest roadblock. I've received lots of inquiries. A lot of people have said, you know what, this is something I really want to continue serving. But it has come down to every last one of them that I've talked to. I really have to stop my retirement pay. Not sure if I really want to do that. Oh, and then I got to stop my VA pay, because a lot of our retirees have a nice little VA check coming in, and to have to give that up for a drill pay, that is some of the stuff that that's a big challenge for us when it comes to that program. The program is out there.
And we are coming short on our time, but that authorization was only for Compo 2. So we could talk more about that, and we have Tennessee here. That was the first state to adopt that, and it was really, you can't go to a reserve Title 10. You can only go to a Title 32 status and maintain your retirement pay.
Yeah. So Doug, Danny, to answer your question, we've assessed three retirees, one SF, one aviation. I can't remember what the flavor of the other one is. The aviator that we assessed does not collect VA or does not collect pay because he doesn't want to forego his VA or his paycheck, but his side hustle is he's an IP, a GS-13 IP in the California National Guard. So he's content just to collect his GS paycheck and then forego getting drill pay.
Okay, closing comments. We're right at our time. Starting, we'll just go backwards. Compo 3, 2, then 1.
I think the one thing I just want to leave to the team is we are a team, and we have to work together. And if we don't show a united front as warrant officers, then they will separate us. And when I say they, it can be any entity. I'm not just talking about our leaders that we work for. Any entity will separate us. We're already a small population, and we have to learn that we are unique. We have to reach out to each other. And don't step on anyone else's footsteps. If you have a CW2 out there that's the fuel warrant, don't be afraid to call them just because you're a CW5. If you're not the subject matter expert, please reach out to the person that is. You know, it builds relationships and it shows confidence in those younger warrants that they are needed and trusted as well. And if you try to steal that thunder across the board, we're going to kill our population. And you're going to be the last CW5 of your organization.
Okay, I'll go real quick because I've said enough. Hey, I am grateful for all of your service. I appreciate you all being here. Hey, this room is full, so give yourself all a hand, right? And then the last thing I'll say is, hey, we always like to say that our W-1s and W-2s are our greatest recruiters, but you are also our greatest recruiters because when you're talking, you have access to soldiers and NCOs, and so always take the opportunity to ask the enlisted to become warrant officers. Never pass up the opportunity because they respect you, they respect the rank, so every person a recruiter. Thanks.
And a quick correction, Compo all, not Compo 1, as the Chief Warrant Officer of the Army.
Exactly. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here today. It's really powerful to look across the room and see everybody in here who's been asking really good, intelligent questions and who's, I think, focused in a lot of right areas. As you go through the rest of the AUSA events, I would just ask you to think about the 4 focus areas that we've established for the Army. So warfighting, building combat-ready formations, continuous transformation, and then stewarding the profession. And see where you, inside your own organization formation, fit into that and the things that you can do to help us transform as an Army. The power of the Warrant Officer cohort is, it's transformative. And so just continue to dig in your area and look for those ways where we can continue to get better. I wanted to take this opportunity to scan across the room and look at everybody in the eyeball and say thank you for what you do on a daily basis. It's noticed at the department level. We're out there getting after it. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for your families and for them allowing you to continue to serve. Really appreciated. And with that, I think we'll close it up and back over to you.
That concludes today's session. We're going to have another session tomorrow at 10 o'clock. It's with Headquarters DAG1, Talent Management, the MICOE, 011 billets, Alpha billets, PME, and we're going to talk about the Warrant Officer career, or the Commander. Okay. And if you can't stay until 10:15, we're actually going to reconvene. For that portion of it, we're moving it to today instead of tomorrow. So stick around. So 10:15, we'll reconvene.